Awesome in the chat.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are so glad that you are joining us here on a rainy day to learn some wonderful things from the team. We are just getting started, and I'm going to ask folks to put their name and their organization in the chat so that we can see who's here today as we get going and kick off the meeting. Thank you, folks, for filling that in. And we have folks coming in now, and I'll pass it over to the commissioner to kick us off.
Great. Thanks so much, Eugenia. And I'll start by apologizing for those of you who are on the advisory committee this morning because I'm going to do a few updates that I shared this morning, but want to make sure that everyone on the Workforce Council also gets those updates. And some, just the KPIs is a little bit of a repeat, but a little bit of a different focus too. So I'll start with my usual updates for folks. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our key performance indicators today. Happy to share where we are on those and some new ones. We have had a working group around workforce efforts, really focused right now on the credentials, but we'll have broad kind of input on EEC workforce related stuff in general. So update on what work is happening there. We are excited to share information about a new student loan repayment program that was funded through this year's budget and that we are going to be administering with the Board and Department of Higher Education. And then exciting new work at the agency focused around our employer partnerships. So first, just recognizing on Saturday, we're getting ready to celebrate International Women's Day and Women's History Month all month. So thinking a lot about all the mentors and coaches who fought for equity so that I had the opportunities on the playing field and in the workplace that I've had as I came up in my career. And also thinking a lot about the women educators who took care of my children and educated them so I could work on career advancement and economic mobility for myself and my family. So thinking about them a lot today too. Okay, since we last met, we had the governor's budget was released, and we're not going to go into great detail on that because we did a big detailed presentation on that at our board meeting. Eugenia will drop that in the chat for us. So if you have interest in that, but it is a great budget for EEC. Couple quick highlights. C3 program funded at $475 and continuing to make incredible impact across the early education and care sector. You can also look in that board deck if you're interested in seeing the latest data on C3. 17,000 new seats across the field in the last 2 years, 8,700 in the last year alone, 20% increases in salaries for staff. Wages are still too low, but heading in the right direction thanks to the support of our legislative partners and the governor's commitment to early education. And also big priority for the governor and all of us this year is access. So making sure that the growth we've seen in our caseloads over the last 2 years continue to get supported into FY26. We are now up around 62,000 families or children receiving child care financial assistance, and governor's budget will make sure we can support that number of families. And as we continue to implement our contracts, our new child care financial assistance contracts, and seeing growth in the DCF and DTA caseloads. So anticipating being able to support the growth in the caseload into FY26, although we'll be watching it very closely, not anticipating being able to open further access around our income eligible population, at least right now, but that's something we will obviously be watching very closely as we continue to look at a wait list of families, a large wait list of families. Couple of other watch areas. We are working closely with our colleagues in higher education around the Career Pathways program, which was funded at $5 million this year, working with our colleagues at Board and Department of Higher Education to make sure that we are able to access resources for all existing and prospective educators to continue that important supported pathway into higher education. So more to talk about there soon as well. The governor also filed a supplemental budget of $100 million. That is intended to support continued family affordability and access. It's funded through surplus from the fair share revenues, as well as workforce development, and potentially some recommendations coming out of the Early Education and Care Interagency Task Force, which we will have more news about very soon too. In fact, next week, instead of hosting our board meeting, it would be our typical board meeting day would be next Wednesday, but in lieu of the board meeting, we'll actually joining with our colleagues from the Executive Office of Education, Labor and Workforce Development, and Economic Development to host a year one report release for the Interagency Task Force. So really looking forward to sharing some of the lessons and learnings that we did over the first year of the task force and some of the preliminary recommendations that focus both on early education and EEC, but really engage across state government on the different resources and agencies that can support family access and workforce development and quality across our system, really bringing the full force of state government to continue supporting and transforming the early education and care system. Last week we hosted, and I want to thank Eugenia for your leadership on this in partnership with the Mass Office of Refugee and Immigrants, MORI. We hosted a Know Your Rights training for folks in the field. I think we had nearly 300 people attending. It was in multiple languages. And I know Eugenia will put the link to the recording of that. Many of us are hearing and wanting to support our early educators and the families they're serving who have concerns regarding law enforcement and immigration enforcement actions. We are still working with the Attorney General's office on specific guidance for the early education and care sector that we anticipate being able to release soon. There was guidance that was released for the K-12 system, and early education and care is different. We have a lot of private programs and private homes where our family child care providers are delivering care. So wanting to make sure that the guidance is tailored specifically to our sector. So working closely on that as well. I am really excited, and you're going to hear from her a little bit later, but I'm really excited to introduce you all to Gabby Santana Goldstein, who probably many of you already know. She's joining us most recently from the Executive Office of Economic Development, and we had a chance to get to know her as part of the work on the Interagency Task Force, and has recently joined EEC as our new employer engagement manager. And you're going to hear a little bit more from her, but it's really about engaging our business community in both the overall work around the early education and care sector and building access and affordability, really working with employers on how they can support their own working families with high quality early childhood education, and also making sure that the state's resources for small businesses are accessible to the early education and care field and our small businesses, family child care, and our center-based programs. So she's going to have a little bit more to tell you about that and some questions for you. But Gabby, do you want to just come off of mute and reintroduce yourself to folks or introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'll keep it very brief since, as the commissioner mentioned, I'll come back to give a little bit more detail on my role and pose a few initial questions for feedback to this group. But super excited to be here. Prior to this role, as the commissioner mentioned, I was in the Executive Office of Economic Development, and one of my the main parts of my portfolio there, very grateful to have had that opportunity, was to work with the Early Education and Child Care Task Force, which is where I had the opportunity to meet this team and fell in love with the work. And then prior to that, my entire career has been in the private sector, primarily in tech, so big tech companies, startups, everything in between. So this role is, for me, pretty perfect to be able to bring more of that community into this work and really see how we can more meaningfully partner. So happy to be here. Thank you.
We think it's perfect for you too, Gabby. So welcome aboard, and looking forward to all you're going to contribute and the opportunity to work together. I do have one more personnel update, but first I just want to take a second to acknowledge sort of what's happening at the federal level and the worry and anxiety that's causing internally, externally, across the country and here in Massachusetts. And we are continuing to track closely all of the federal actions that are happening and sort of taking them step by step. I think it's really our plan to deal with things as they come and that we understand true impact on our system. There are many steps that are happening in the process. We're working closely with the governor's office, working closely with the attorney general's office, and I know the attorney generals are working with attorney general offices in other states. The courts are obviously weighing in on many of the actions that are happening. So we are working very hard to stay focused, to try and block out some of the chaos so that we can continue to stand firm in our values and the work that we know we need to do. No direct impact for early education and care and childcare that we are aware of right now. And as I said, our commitment is to continue to track that. Most of our federal funding is block grants that come to the state. These dollars are appropriated by the state to the agency, and then we seek reimbursement for those dollars. So we're not anticipating or seeing any actions that are going to have direct impact either on our staffing at this moment or on payments to our early education and care sector. We are obviously working very closely with our Head Start community on some of the impacts and discussion happening there. In advocacy and solidarity around supporting those essential resources for the community. But again, we don't have any direct impact action to report right now, but we'll continue to be monitoring all those actions and staying focused while we await to see if there's anything that we need to do to protect the resources here and maximize all federal funding opportunities for the state. Okay, happy to take some questions too, but I do want to do one more exciting personnel update that I have to share with everyone. Many of you have had a chance for over many years to work with Amy Checkaway, and I'm really, really pleased to announce a promotion for Amy, reflecting her work. She is now going to be a deputy commissioner for research policy and strategy. I know I keep saying it in a different order, but it's all those things. And under Amy's leadership, we have built an entire new division that has really been dedicated to data analytics and research. You're going to hear from Adrienne Murphy, who is our very talented data analytics director, and many of you have heard already from Ashley White. I think Greg Chick here, who is one of our data analysts, may also be here with us today too. So, and she has also been overseeing the policy work, and going forward, will be leading a lot of our strategy, strategic planning work, as well as project management. It is really a division dedicated to organizational effectiveness and making sure that the agency itself, as well as our stakeholders, have the information, the evidence, and the data that's needed to be able to move forward based on what we know is happening in the field, the experience of those who are doing the work, the experience of the families. And so, for example, anyone who was on the advisory committee this morning, we had a really important data presentation on the experience of families trying to access childcare, which helps inform our work. So we are so fortunate to have Amy Checkaway in service to the Commonwealth and at the Department of Early Education and Care. And it's exciting to recognize you with this promotion, Amy, and I want to thank you for being willing to take on this really critical leadership role at this time at the agency.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm so fortunate to have such an amazing team, first and foremost, and also to hopefully be building infrastructure and systems and engagement that's sustainable, even beyond the people. So thank you so much for the recognition. And maybe you'll stop embarrassing me too soon.
I'm not done yet, but maybe in a couple months. So important. And, you know, I think thinking about all the things that are happening at the federal level, I think one of the things that I'm really thinking about is our public service and our public servants, and the message that is undermining the value of what all of our public servants are doing to promote good quality programming, to protect our environment, to help people internationally. And so for just feeling like having an opportunity to recognize truly exceptional service, which we have all over state government, and is an opportunity that I'm not gonna miss the opportunity to do that right now. So thank you, Amy. And good segue, unless anyone has any questions, to talk a little bit about our key performance indicators that we have been committed to making sure that we are being transparent and providing information and data around what's happening. And we rolled out an initial set of key performance indicators and dashboards, and based on feedback from you and from staff at the agency, we will continue to add to that dashboard. So Amy, happy to turn it over to you so that you and your team can share updates on where we are on the KPIs and some of the new dashboards that we've added.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to provide a brief overview and update on one of those structures I was just talking about that we have put in place and are continuing to develop and iterate on so that the agency can track progress towards strategic goals and objectives, understand the implementation and effects of investments and programs and services, and also share outwardly as much as possible updated data that folks can use real time to answer questions, pull information, and that is hopefully helpful to each person here in a different way. So today, Adrienne Murphy, our Senior Director of Data Analytics, is going to provide what will be a refresher for some, maybe a repeat even today for some others, although we're going to try to focus in a little bit on the workforce side of things in particular here, and then also get some quick input and answer any questions, both about what we have accomplished so far and where we should go from here. Adrienne, over to you. And I'm going to put in the chat to up front a link to our KPIs and data dashboards that are on our website. So focus on what Adrienne has to say, but also so folks can poke around simultaneously.
Great. Thanks, Amy. I'm excited to share an update today about our key performance indicator work, and really hoping today to both share a little bit about the original version of the dashboards that we launched back in October, as the commissioner mentioned. Also want to share some updates about updates around what's new in the dashboard as we can continue to iterate and evolve on our work, and then hoping to spend at least a little bit of time hearing from you all about ways that we might be able to continue to evolve the dashboard to make it increasingly usable and valuable to you and your organizations. So before, and I should want to give credit where credit is due, that I get to stand up here and present today, but really this is the work of my team, and particularly of Greg Chick, who's on the call with us today, who's really the engine behind the dashboards and made this work possible. So before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit about our goals in engaging in this KPI work, which are really threefold. First, we set out as an agency to identify the metrics that we would use and the quantifiable data that we would use to measure our progress against our agency strategic priorities. Then we set out to develop a set of dashboards or tools to help us do that, to help us regularly look at these metrics and track our progress on our agency priorities. And then thirdly, we set out to increase transparency and public access to KPIs and of course other data metrics of interest around the health of the early education and care sector, realizing that not only did we need to be able to track this data internally at EEC, but we wanted to make it transparent to our many stakeholders in the field and beyond. So to do this, we developed a set of key performance indicators. Eugenia, do you mind advancing the slide? Thanks. A set of key performance indicators across 3 of our strategic priorities: family access, program stability, and then probably most relevant to the work of this council, workforce support. We started with these 3 priority areas because they're where we have the most data readily available now, but we plan as we continue to iterate on the dashboard to add additional priorities as the work evolves. In the family access space, we've identified KPIs focused on the proportion of children statewide enrolled in formal early education and care, as well as the proportion of eligible children enrolled in childcare financial assistance. For both of these metrics, we work with an external vendor to combine data from the US Census alongside our childcare financial assistance and Commonwealth Cares for Children, or C3 data, in order to really understand the supply and demand for care statewide, and to understand who is and is not being served statewide, and then also with breakdowns by region. There's also data on the dashboard around our statewide CCFA, Child Care Financial Assistance or CCFA caseload, disaggregated by subsidy type and funding source and region. The dashboard includes data on children on the waitlist for Child Care Financial Assistance. And then new as of February, we also have new data on the proportion of our programs that participate in CCFA, either by having a signed voucher agreement or a contract to serve children with CCFA, which we were excited to be able to add last month. In the program stability space, we have data on the number of licensed programs and funded programs statewide and the capacity of those programs, as well as program openings and closings over time, so we can begin to understand what's driving the trends that we're seeing in our license capacity. And then we were excited in February to expand this portion of the dashboard to include data on our licensed residential and placement or RMP system, which is a key piece of our work here at EEC that was not previously represented on the dashboard. And then finally, in the workforce space, which is likely of the highest interest for this council, we identified key performance indicators around both the approximate size of the workforce by role, which we gather from C3 application data, as well as the average educator wages by role, which I think, as folks likely know, programs share with us as part of their C3 application, the hourly wage of their highest and lowest paid individuals by role. And we use that to understand the average wages, both statewide and new as of February. We also have this broken down by licensing region. So this slide just highlights a little bit, reiterates what was new in February. We update the data in the dashboard monthly, but in February we did a much bigger content update of the dashboard. As I mentioned, you can see at right some of the new graphs that we added to the dashboard around the percent of licensed, the percent of programs participating in child care financial assistance, as well as data on our licensed residential and placement programs. And we added region filters to all of the visuals and also made it a little bit easier to track the program opening and closing data. As I noted at the outset, we've really been approaching the dashboard work at EEC with a sort of iterative lens, knowing that we were putting our first public data dashboard out there in the fall, but we intended to continue and to iterate and both add new metrics as well as add new filters and interactivity. And we've been working on this to do this based on both internal and external feedback. And we're excited to continue that and to continue to collect feedback, both from internal folks here at EEC, but also our advisory councils and other folks externally who engage with EEC data. And I wanted to highlight here, while the educator wage data on the dashboard is not new, we've added some new filters to allow you users to look at this data by region, which we were able to add in February. This metric leverages data that we're currently collecting through the C3 process, which we're really grateful to programs for providing, but it also has some limitations, and we're excited as we think about what it means to evolve the data on the dashboard to think about what this metric might look like in the future as, for example, the new educator portal evolves. So I'd love to use sort of this slide as a jumping off point to talk a little bit more with you all about how we can continue to iterate on the dashboard over time to make sure that it's more valuable to you and your respective organizations. I was saying to our team yesterday that these dashboards are only as valuable, the data in the dashboards are only as valuable as they are usable for folks. So I'd love to hear a little bit from folks, either if you knew about the dashboards before today and have used them, how they've been useful to you, or if there are ways, if they're new to you, ways that you think they might be useful in the future. And then also, if you have thoughts around how we can continue to make the dashboard even more valuable to you and your organization as we move forward, whether that be with new metrics or new filters or new ways of engaging with the dashboard. I'd love to hear about any of that as we think about how we continue to iterate and evolve the dashboard over time. I don't know, maybe Eugenia, if you want to go back to the slide with the list of all of the metrics.
Or do you want to stop sharing for a minute so we can
Yeah.
see everyone and as I said, we've already added some new dashboards based on feedback. I'm personally very happy to see our residential and placement licensing data, not something we talk about as much. Not just the new data on the number of programs that are participating in childcare financial assistance, but important to note that it's gone up from about 50% of licensed programs participating to about 70% participating. So increases in CCFA rates and C3 doing their job, bringing more programs into the system and giving families many more options about where they can enroll their kids, which is great to see. Other thoughts on data, and I know these guys will put their email in the chat. So if people have I'd really like, what do we call it in the first advisory, the dream board?
Yeah.
So some may be dashboards we haven't created yet based on existing data, and some may be dashboards based on future state data. New educator portal, new family portal coming. All of those will enable us to have a greater insight into the experience both of our families and of our educators. So nice. Go ahead, Adrian.
I was going to say, I saw Jessica's question in the chat about the limitations. I think, Jessica, I was thinking about, sort of right now, the wage data we collect is at the program level. But I think as the educator portal comes online and as we build out our IT systems more robustly, there's an opportunity to collect more granular or stronger data that I think can help some of these metrics evolve over time.
Okay.
I don't know.
Seeing no more questions, and we can come back to it. But why don't we keep rolling? Unless there's anything else you want to add, Adrian, or
no, I was just going to say
Greg?
Too that this is a great opportunity. This is a great group to help us get the word out about the dashboard. So please, you are helpful to us as sort of eyes and ears on the ground to help. So if you run across folks who are asking some of the questions that around data that we've talked about today, would love to enlist you all as help in getting the word out. And then Amy put our team email address, and it's also on the dashboard. If folks have questions or feedback long after this meeting, happy to take it via email as well. So thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think, Jocelyn, am I turning it over to you to talk a little bit about, you all have been hearing us talk about the work we've been doing to move from a sort of static certification system to a credentialing pathway, which will be the foundation of what we hope will be meaningful career pathways that are supported, aligned with professional development opportunities, and hopefully eventually some level of compensation as well. So, but the foundation of all of that is building a new credential, and the team has been working very hard over the last 2 years to really get this work moving. And I think we're pretty excited about the progress. So Jocelyn, do you want to share a little update? And I think we are intending now to bring a more substantial sort of update to the board in May around where we are in the credential work, but we won't see you again before that. So stopping through here to share with all of you where we are.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. And yes, happy to do that. And I think just to frame up the update that we have, we've been doing a lot of work, and I'll sort of remind everybody where we are in just a second, and really are focusing right now on these working groups that we've been running, which is an opportunity to work with folks out in the field and do some co-design. Like, we framed up our sort of first shot at the structures that were in process. And now we're really digging into thinking about, is this right from different program types? So I think we're starting a pathway to bringing this out for a lot of more public discussion. And this is really our first step in doing that work. Eugenia, can you go to the next slide? So you've seen this before, and we actually, I will say, are working right now in anticipation of the future board meeting in a more forward-looking timeline. so that we can start mapping out how this will play out over the next few years. But this does encompass and highlight the work that is in progress right now. And I know we've talked about it before, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but effectively, we have been going through the process, working with a team at AAR to be clear about the structure of the credential, how it's organized, the levels for educators, the types of additional roles we want to attend to, and all of the expectations, the competencies, and the verification requirements associated with that. We are also working with AAR on a salary scale, which is in development at the same time. So sort of recommendations around what salaries could look like, particularly if we think about making sure that we're paying attention to the living wage, and also thinking about when and how our system should get salaries commensurate with those in the public school. So that is something else that's under development. I think it would be a great tool to inform our cost model work and a lot of our thinking around how and at what level we're funding programs. If we're starting to think about an aspirational state where we really do move towards this credential and towards higher compensation. We're focused on two different pathways. Just a reminder, one's a professional development pathway. One is a higher education pathway that uses certificates and degrees as opposed to the one-off college credits, one-off courses with college credits that we currently have. We're also working about integrating our work into registered apprenticeship opportunities, working very closely with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards around structuring some of the expectations for an early education apprenticeship based on these expectations we're developing, and that work is very much ongoing as well. And finally, we are developing an educator portal. We have contracted with a vendor for that. So we are in the process of doing the early design work with the vendor to start mapping out the stages of development. But the goal is over the next few months to have a minimum viable product. So that's the tech term for sort of the small initial phase of the development, and we will keep building on that and expanding and growing the capacity and the functions of the system over time. And finally, we're working on the ways in which we're communicating and getting feedback on the development. So Eugenia, if you go to the next slide, that is really the focus of what I wanted to talk about here. So in doing this work, we recognize that engaging with everyone is going to be really important in getting this right, because we do want to develop a credential that accomplishes what we have sort of come to it with accomplishing. As the commissioner said, updating a system that is really outdated, developing a system that supports and provides guidance to educators across their entire professional career around roles, opportunities, and the competencies and the skills that are associated with each role and that would help them move and advance through the field. And we want to do it in a way that's encompassing and inclusive of the entire field, but also thinking very carefully about the fact that family childcare is different than center-based. Out of school time is different. Our expectations can't be exactly the same across the different parts of our system, but we want everybody to be in the same system. So to that end, we're making sure that we're connecting broadly across our system, both thinking about our state partners and other agencies that we are working with, and have an ongoing and regular meeting where we both meet internally to plan and make decisions, but also bring in external partners and other agency partners as we need to move that process. But also working very closely with the institutions of higher education, particularly our career pathways grantees, to think about ways and how to develop both the higher education pathways, but also to think about intersections between pathways. And also paying close attention to the ways in which the workforce support system that we've been funding is going to be integrated into and support the new system. So thinking about and engaging with the professional development centers, the statewide academy, the ECSOs, and really being planful about how when we launch this, the system will build on and integrate itself into the structures that we already have in place. So we have many ongoing conversations with these groups as part of doing business, but we're making sure that the credential work is part of those conversations. And then finally, we have the external out. No, it's okay, you can go, Eugenia. We have the external outreach that we are doing, which is right at this moment in time, really largely driven by these small working groups that we've developed. We have a structure whereby we have small sessions that are focused on particular program types that meet regularly, and then we bring everybody together across all the program types for a larger session periodically to sort of reflect on what we've been learning from the small sessions. I know it's a lot of text on the page. You don't really need the dates and the times, but you can see the topics that we've been focused on. We've started by thinking about roles in different program types and where they might fit in the credential. I think those conversations have been particularly important on the family childcare side and the out of school time side. But what's really been fun is that we have heard very clearly that being included in the credential is important, but what it looks like is going to be different. And it is going to be important to make sure we're being very intentional about what roles are included and how they're included in the credential. We just had a round of meetings thinking about looking at a initial proposed salary scale and thinking about both how that fits into the cost model, but also some larger questions are in the cost model, such as the types of comprehensive services that we should be taking into account. And similarly, got great feedback on that. That's a big topic and really is the way that we're sort of bringing together all of the financing questions that are associated with this credential. So we are going to come back and have another round of meetings on that. And then in May, we're going to return to the structure of the credential and start really thinking deeply about the structures of the verification process. And I see Kate Marie's question about whether the salary scale will be regional. That is a point of discussion. We do have one right now that has been designed to be regional. And one of the questions that we've been asking people is, does this make sense for the salary scale to be regional? And the answer to date has been yes, but it might actually but also please let's recognize that regions are not homogenous themselves and that there's a lot of variation within regions. So we do need to think about that. You can go to the next slide. So this is a summary of some of the things that we've been talking about and the things that we've heard from the group. I think just highlighting some points that have come through in these discussions. It's become very clear that we need an administrative role early on in one's process as growth as an educator. I think traditionally we're so used to the center-based model. We think about the administrative role happening after one's been an educator and when one moves into a director function. But when we start including family childcare and out of school time in the conversation, it becomes very clear that this is really important administrative function that might start early on in one's job in a program, and that the credential needs to recognize that. And that there also are staff that might be working and playing really important roles in the program, but are not necessarily on a professional track. So we need to think about the qualifications and ensuring the qualifications, but at the same time, not setting requirements that preclude people from working in programs. But overall, there's a lot of excitement about incentivizing professionalism and creating a pathway for advancement. So I think that these conversations have been really interesting and energizing to me. And Ellen, I know I'm going to pass it over to you for the next section too. So I think I'll pass it over now to see if you have anything else that you want to add on the working group conversations that we've had.
No, just that that they're ongoing, and as others become interested, or for those that would like to participate, you're always welcome. And Eugenia has been wonderful about including newcomers to the working groups, and also offering to bring them up to speed prior to some of these working groups. So just the message is everyone is welcome, and we're really interested in diverse perspectives.
Should I pause for questions before we move on?
Yeah, let's pause and maybe stop sharing for a minute, see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we're cooking through. And we can move on to loan repayment. Questions for Jocelyn or Ellen about content, how to engage, or some of the
I heard a
key-
vote for regional salary scales. I'll just say that.
Yeah, regional, or maybe deeper than regional. I think
Um,
Kate Marie might even have been saying, yeah.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Commissioner, to that point, I think as we think about, because we deal with this a lot at the Y, because we have such varying size and region across the state, I would argue for even deeper if that is something you're going to put out there beyond just region, right? Because hours of operation, number of children that you serve, revenue, operating budget, I think it's all going to play into it. And so you don't want to try to compare apples to oranges, even if it's within the same region. So the more maybe detailed and granular you get, well, maybe more difficult, it may behoove the field better.
Yeah, it gets complicated. One suggestion was to think about using the Community Opportunity Index that we've been using for C3. I don't know what that looks like. We'll definitely take a look, but I think that it's an interesting data challenge to think about how to make it more nuanced, but it's something we will take on. Sure.
Hi, I'm sorry that it logged me in regular and then now I'm a panelist. I don't know what's going on. I'm just like pushing the buttons here. My split personality, right? In 4 different meetings, but I love everything professional development. If you guys aren't aware of that, higher ed, PD, CEUs, all of it. I'm here for all of it with a special near and dear for infants and toddlers. So I would absolutely, volunteer myself to be involved in any of the work groups as you see needed or fit, just to make sure that there is a voice for babies represented.
Thank you, Cheryl. And on
You're
that
welcome.
point, I didn't get into the nuances of it, but we are also hearing loud and clear that it will be important to have opportunities for specialization with infants and toddlers, preschool and mixed age, and out of school time as well.
Yes, and I thank you all for your work on this. This is a huge, huge undertaking. I've been here since before COVID when we started with those ones, and then it's great. It's really great. It's really great to see.
Well, thank you. I think I may have underestimated this when we started it, but nonetheless, I think we are getting to the point too where appreciate your offer for help. We are going to start to really draw on many, many people in launching
But
this.
nobody knows how you got here. It's just the end result that will matter once you get there. Eye on the prize.
We're committed to the process too, Cheryl. Steve?
Yeah, no, thank you for all of this. Let me first say the key performance indicators, fantastic. I had to close my screen down because I'm filtering and I'm doing all this stuff and you can't see my hands because my camera doesn't work. And I apologize for that too. But that is really terrific. I had to set it aside and I'll be up till like 2 a.m. now going and comparing and graphing and everything. That is really, really fantastic. I want to thank you all for that. And that it's up-to-date information. Usually we see this information and it's, you know, from 1991 and it's like, well, great, but a few things have changed since then. I did want to talk a little bit about the proposed the salary scale being regional. And there's a whole lot of nuance within the regions too, you know, size of the center impacts, for us at least, impacts the pay of the center director. Some centers, we have assistant directors if they're a new center director, so that we have another bit of support for them so that they can grow. That's a cost where that center director may make a little less because they have more helpers. So there's a whole lot of models we and everybody are playing around with. So I'm just a little bit nervous about rolling off saying all center directors should make, you know, and if you look back at the data, $29 an hour. And I have no idea where our center directors compare to that. There's other factors beyond number of children, experience, other things like that. So we could find ourselves being painted in a corner financially, and I just worry about
and we don't
that
want
a
to do
little
that. See, this is the piece of this that I feel like is really important to get right. I will also just say, like, at this point in time, the salary scale is a conceptual and aspirational tool that we are developing. It doesn't tie to anything. And I think that there is probably another step of the work that's saying, okay, and now what if we have these goals, what do we do with them? But I will say one thing, and there's a follow-up question in this for you or anybody. What you said has come up before, and one thing that we're thinking about is rather than having like a number, if it might be helpful to have ranges. We certainly thought about the fact that if you looked at a public school salary, there are all these steps, and we didn't want to make this super complicated. But it does feel like we should be recognizing that there isn't just one number. There are a lot of reasons why different people at the same level might make different amounts.
Yeah, no, the range would be a good idea. And the other thing is the public schools in our service area have wildly different salaries too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's a statewide thing or a Hampden County thing, but there is just wildly different starting salaries in various cities. So that's maybe where the basis of the range is, based on how wide is the range for the public schools.
Yeah, I was wondering if districts are the right unit of government for us to be thinking about, but you make a good point because your service areas, many of your service areas will cross multiple districts.
We may have, and I haven't done the math, I bet we have 15 districts in our service area if we were to add them all up, because each city's a district. We're not county government anymore. That ended in the, I don't know, 80s or whatever, unfortunately, in some ways.
Yeah, I moved
Thanks.
here from California and I was like a long time ago. In maybe not quite 1991, Steve, when most of the data was from, but I moved here from California. I was like, where are the counties? But now I like state. Now I like the state unit of government. So for childcare and early ed. Okay. Other thoughts or questions for, oh, we have more, we have at least one more. Did you go through the timeline? You did.
Yeah.
I did.
Oh, you did. Yeah.
No, we're done with this part of the presentation.
Okay.
I will call out, there's some nice ideas in the chat too about things to think about. And I think, there's also the really important point about making sure we're balancing expectations on our already overloaded staff with like just the mechanics and the expectations of this. I will say from the perspective of what we are asking people to do, there is a really challenging balance because we want the credential to be meaningful. And we're thinking about pathways that are commensurate across higher ed and across the training pathway. So there is a certain commitment of time that is going to be required in the professional learning. But we're not, that can happen at anybody's pace. But I will say on the administrative side of this, we are paying close attention to how can we use the new technology to make the administration of this simpler? How many places can we have where credit for things that you need credit for are automatically counted? And really just like, we want to stay away from like the heavy upload of documents and sending of actual documents that we have in our current system. So it's going to be a little driven by what's possible, but please know that that is definitely something we're thinking about.
Right. Nobody wants to disrupt the existing workforce. Or make it harder for hiring or retaining staff. So I think that's, the number of things this team is balancing and trying to come up with a meaningful credential with pathways that are both higher education and also training and credit for prior learning experience, and recognizing and valuing the existing workforce and tying salaries that, eventually, conceptually, and how to do that, connected or not connected to funding. So balancing a lot of really important things as we, continue to march down, like, let's make this a meaningful career pathway where people can see themselves coming in and staying in the field, and that we're lining up the resources to make sure people can move along that path. And they can see salary increases as they do. It's the North Star. Okay. Speaking of making compensation for staff working in the field, kind of thinking broadly about the compensation, really grateful to the legislature for supporting additional funding this year for a new loan repayment program. We got $7.5 million this year in the FY25 budget to create a new loan repayment program for the early education and care workforce. And it was definitely not our intention to stand up a brand new program and build that capacity at EEC, but instead want to work with the experts, and the legislature directed us to do that as well. So good collaboration with our colleagues at the board and Department of Higher Education to stand up a new program. So I think, Jocelyn, I'm turning it back to you and your team to walk us through where we are on that.
Yes, thank you. And you can go to the next slide, Ellen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, and so, as the commissioner mentioned, we worked on the student loan repayment details, the criteria, and with our partners at the Department of Higher Ed, and had the criteria passed through both our board and the Department of Higher Ed. So we're in really good shape moving forward. And our next steps are really to stand up the application process and then build in all of the technical supports. And we meet with DHE very regularly around next steps. And it looks like we're in line for the technical supports, and we'll start, ideally the applications will be open this coming fall. And the applicants will have opportunity to apply, and it will be retroactive to July 1, 2024. So lots of good work going on, and we're just actually now everything's approved, and we're just waiting for the next steps in terms of technical support.
And you can see here the eligibility requirements and sort of how much people will get per year, all of which are aligned with, you know, some of the ways we approach our programming, but also expectations and sort of standard processes that Department of Higher Education has as well. You can go to the next slide, Eugenia. I think, Ellen, you covered a lot.
Yeah, I think I pretty much did, and this is just where we are. As I said, retroactive to July 1, 2024, and lots of work that we'll have to do around the communication plan once the application is open.
And also, I'm just going to highlight, there's one bullet point here, working to get the application created in Nelnet. That's not a small bullet point, even though it might look the same size as everything else. I think that is really where the work is right now. We know what we want to do. We have the partners to do it. We have to get the technology to do it for us.
Great, thanks. Any questions or thoughts for everyone? Again, part of our overall strategy, two things I think this program represents. One is, as we think about compensation for the workforce and recruitment and retention, we want to think as broadly as possible about that. So is it scholarships? Is it loan repayments? So they're not paying that off and they're able to stay in the field and have, you know, their incomes can go further because we're helping to pay off loans. And also making sure that we're taking advantage of the expertise across state government to do what we need to do, and not trying to keep it all in-house and build new capacity where we don't have it or want to build from scratch. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks so much. This is really exciting. So thanks for presenting this, and I know it'll be really meaningful to the workforce. Wanted to highlight with a particular workforce that may not be relevant to everyone, so I'll go quickly. But the Head Start home visiting workforce, which is sometimes associated, as you know, with center-based Head Start programs, and sometimes associated with home visiting only programs that don't have a correlated center. And if we are talking about this as a way to build up the workforce as a whole, we know that home visitors become classroom teachers, classroom teachers become home visitors, and it's a relatively fluid workforce. We want to make sure to support all of. So wanted to know if A, you've looked into its eligibility for home visitors, and B, if that's something that may fit in within the boundaries.
Yeah, and Heidi asked about social workers and behavioral health workers too. I think that there are many roles that are part of our field, and we have been trying to be as inclusive as possible with the different programs we set up. I think this one is new, and we do expect it to have high demand. So we're trying to balance how open to make it out of the gate, while also recognizing that this is something that we need to pay attention to. Ellen, do you?
I was just going to add that the scholarship, we were able to work with the Department of Higher Ed this past year and expand eligibility to a much broader range of educator types and the different positions that you just mentioned. And then we aligned the student loan repayment with that same broad scope, so that we could capture as many folks that have been in the field, that have been working and probably paying their loans as they've been going. So we're working diligently on that to try to include as many folks as we can. And as Jocelyn said, I think this will probably be pretty high demand. This is the first time we've had it. So, you know, we'll, DHE intends to disseminate the funds until they're gone. So hopefully with that broader scope, we'll be able to include more educators or educator type position.
And I think there was a question about when the timing of the scholarship.
So the new scholarship opens April 1st. And that scholarship opens, and that's for the new semester, new fiscal year, because awards for those that receive the scholarship in the last fiscal year will have funds right through to the end of the spring semester. And then the new awards go through beginning for the fall semester. And as we have done in the past, the scholarship actually remains open until almost all of the funds have been dispersed. So there's still lots of time. So for those that are interested in the new year or looking to go back to school next fall, April 1, they can begin applying for the scholarship.
Lots of love in the chat, Jocelyn, for you and your team and all the work you've been doing around workforce and definitely the work to make higher education more accessible in general for our workforce, more affordable. And even if they were able to figure it out on their own, we want to come back in the backside and make sure we can help pay. I think most of you know we were at the YMCA in Framingham at Heidi's program for the board meeting in February, and I met one teacher who is enrolled in an apprenticeship program. I met one teacher who, at least one who's doing enrolled in career pathways, and one who's accessing the early education, higher education scholarship and about to graduate with her BA. Is from Fitchburg? I can't remember, from Fitchburg State University. So was amazing to see educators in the classrooms who are accessing higher education and also able to continue doing work through leadership of Jocelyn and her team and our partners in higher education. So, and our partners in the field who are helping their educators access those resources. So. Yeah, I am often surprised when I talk to educators when they talk about having student loans or not accessing the scholarship. And I just want to recognize the teams are doing so much more to make sure we're doing outreach and we're spending more of those funds than we ever have. And I know we have more to do. And some of the questions in the chat were about Head Start home visitors and behavioral health and social work staff. So certainly, we've expanded the majors and the eligible staff. And that's something obviously we can continue to look at, especially if we're not fully expending the funds. So good feedback for us.
I'm also, I just put it in the chat, I'm happy at our Macy conference. We're doing it at Natick High School. If there's flyers or postcard, or whatever that we can put, we have inserts to go into bags, or if EEC wants to have a table, we're happy to do that. To get the information. It's right after it opens on the 1st, so it's around the 26th. So we're happy to get that information out to them as well too.
Thank you.
Great. We should
about that.
Some giveaways that people can have.
They love their giveaways. Yep.
It's
really funny in a world where we've moved away from print. It is no longer common to have a stack of flyers and handouts.
Or if you get me something, I'm happy to insert it into our catalog, our program brochure, like apply here, QR code. I don't know, whatever.
I was going to say, maybe it'll be a QR code.
Yeah, Cheryl, we'll work on something with that, especially for the scholarship and the communication plan for the scholarship once it's, student loan repayment as soon as it's ready to.
Yep. However, we can assist in that. I know at Fisher, all my courses, we put it in course announcements. We send it out repeatedly.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure the HR departments for, especially the big agencies have access to that information readily available so they can use it at the time of interviews and recruitment and retention. Come work with us. There's a scholarship program that can support your higher education aspirations. So great suggestion. Okay. One more item. I'm happy to turn it back to Gabby, who actually is working under Jocelyn's team as we sort of organize all of ourselves around this sort of user experience. So the experience of our programs and providers and our educators. Gabby is working really closely under Jocelyn and with her team as we think about small business resources and engagement with the business community. So Gabby, happy to turn it to you to talk a little bit more about your role and how you're approaching it.
Sounds great. Eugenia, you can just go to the next slide. And I'll voice some of this over, and then once we get to the discussion part, we can take down the slide. But as the commissioner mentioned, I'm focused on 2 work streams. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going deeper into the details of my role here at EEC. And then if we have time, I'm obviously very happy to answer any questions, acknowledging it's still early in the work. And I also have some questions I'd love to pose to the group for some initial input. But in terms of the work streams, the first is really around deepening our relationships with employers and really bringing them to the table as close partners as we develop these collaborative strategies to increase access for all families to affordable, high-quality childcare. think everybody in this room already knows a lot of this, right? But of course, the early education childcare sector is the workforce behind the workforce. People can't meaningfully engage in the workforce without having adequate childcare. And we're lucky in that there have been, I think, a lot of folks at the state level, nationwide, who've been making the business case for this as well, and really trying to bring the business community along, and making the case for why this matters to them. And so I think the time is really pretty perfect. I do think the time is now to engage the business community and bring them to the table, to be partners in creating a system for capacity building. So one way we're excited to test and pilot some ideas is through the $2.5 million budget line item that was included in the FY25 budget. So for those who may not be familiar with that line item, this language charges EEC with developing an employer-supported pilot program that addresses both affordability and access for families, as well as capacity building for the sector. I would say the language is fairly flexible in terms of what we can design, so long as it addresses these goals that the legislature has outlined. And the goals very much align with whatever we would want to do with this type of funding as well. So it's something we're charged with, something we're really excited about. It's a great opportunity to, like I said, bring employers along with us and really support them in trying to bring some innovative solutions to light. It is a matching program. It requires a match by employer. So the total pool of funds would be $5 million going to these initiatives, 2.5 from the state, 2.5 from employers. In terms of what we might do with it, very happy to turn to this group for ideas, but some preliminary ideas that we've had or have been discussing has been possibly some sort of employer resource center where we would provide the necessary supports and technical assistance for an employer to stand up meaningfully new policies and benefits for their employees. So you can imagine anything from creating policies around flexible schedules, for example, for shift workers. That isn't something that is broadly available to that community, but can be. All the way to building on-site childcare and providing subsidies for families. So there is a really wide range depending, I think, on the size of the employer, who their employees are, the communities in which they operate, and what would make the most sense. Other ideas that have been discussed are around replicating some sort of tri-share model, similar to what's being piloted in Iowa and Michigan. If anyone is familiar with those, they've gotten I think a lot of recognition for good work. And so these are models in which the costs are somewhat shared between the state, employers, and families, as well as, at least in the Iowa model, some funding going towards the early education childcare workforce in the form of increased wages. And so I think the questions that arise for us as it relates to those models is, while interesting, is $5 million enough funding to stand up something meaningful that would create actual systems change in Massachusetts, especially in light of the fact that we have the C3, which other states don't. And so the circumstances and I think the starting points are quite different. And so it's something for us to debate and really think about. The other half of my portfolio, and then I'll pause, is something I'm very excited about. So it's figuring out how to leverage and adapt existing small business resources to support childcare providers. This really stemmed directly out of the task force work while I was at the Executive Office of Economic Development, and realizing that a lot of what early educators were asking for in the summer listening sessions that we attended were not all too dissimilar from what small businesses broadly need in terms of resources and supports in the Commonwealth. And we have a lot of those available and ready to be distributed. That said, I fully recognize that there are a lot of nuances and differences between how and what this community needs versus, say, a restaurant owner. And so I think that's why the word in terms of adapt is really key to this work stream. I don't know that we're going to be successful in simply opening up existing resources in the way they exist today, but really thinking strategically around what's most needed and what are ways that we can adapt what exists out there to make it available to this community. So, you know, it's everything from, or at least what I've heard thus far, has been around basic financial literacy, help marketing businesses, help with tax preparation, and education on the tax preparation side, insurance, so on and so forth. So I'm looking forward to continuing to educate myself as it relates to the highest needs and see what we can do there. So I will pause here. Eugenia, you can take down the slide if you'd like. I will pause for questions, and then I have some for the group as well. Okay, I'm happy to go to my questions then. Okay, so the first one that I have for the group is, as we think about how to best create a collaborative system between childcare providers and employers to expand capacity in the early education childcare sector, are there examples from your own communities that we can look to for learnings?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So as we think about how to best create a collaborative system between childcare providers and employers, so the business community, to expand capacity in the early education and childcare sector, are there examples from your own communities that we can look to for learnings? And the answer very well could be no. Like, we haven't seen anything, but yes, please. I'm so sorry, I don't know your full name. Jay Acevedo.
I'm sorry, I got kicked off and it changed. I'm
No,
just,
that's okay.
I'm a family childcare owner in Cambridge. And I think some of the examples you already in regards to tax preparation, lawyers, in order to check our documents would be very helpful. I, again, am here in the city of Cambridge, and what I have been doing has been they're doing a lot of technical assistance and asking and allowing us to use it for various uses. Like, for example, and I'll give examples, for our childcare program, we applied for technical assistance and we were able to buy a washer and dryer to wash sheets for the business and things of that sort. So things of that sort that, you know, are needed in order to keep safety and the program going, but also our high costs, but also our only one-time costs. So thinking about that is like, what can be useful for not just 10 kids, but 100 kids that those providers might serve. Also, what I've been seeing due to my research is a lot of housing combination where acquiring property to do rentals and to have childcare, and that's not just in the state, but in different states is becoming a model, because we know how important housing is for family childcare providers. So if we are requiring childcare providers to operate in their home, we have to also be mindful of having sustainability in their housing and things of that sort, and really looking at an ownership of how we can support providers owning the property that they are able to operate in, because fair housing and things of that sort is really things to consider, because we want to ensure that providers are able to operate and get more spaces and continue running their programs. So definitely housing, and then technical assistance that is abroad, so that the provider or the business owner can really use it for the business and the business need, because not everybody has the same needs. So just keeping that in mind.
That's great. Thank you so much. Very, very helpful. So maybe along those same lines, around the business resources for some small business supports for early educators, what are some of the most pressing needs that you're all aware of, that you're facing today, that aren't available to you?
Or even if you have suggestions about where we should go to get answers to these questions, which may not be this group, we can send Gabby to places.
You can send me anywhere.
directors groups or, you know, family childcare association groups, Jessica, or other places where a sort of plurality of folks who might have answers or be interested in this could provide that feedback to Gabby. Go ahead, Jessica, sorry.
No, thank you. I was just gonna, when you asked the question, I just think financial, and I think you already mentioned this, but definitely financial support or like CPAs, like there's just a lot of finance things that I think as small businesses we're trying to navigate. So if we had professionals actually helping us navigate that there would be less errors. And the only other thing I was thinking is having our providers become minority based get bids. So those are things that also as a small business in the city of Cambridge, those are things that I have put myself into place, so I get it. But just to say, because the commissioner's here, there hasn't been a lot of bids for early education or childcare, so it's really hard to even access or support if there's not even the opportunity to get those bids. So those are two things that I've
That's really helpful. Thank you. That's new. I hadn't heard that. Stephen? Oh,
There we go. I think I got it.
yeah.
So I'm sorry, what Jessica said was just amazing and brilliant and exactly spot on. Her comment about housing is 100% there. One of the struggles we've had over the years, we're a system of home educators, and one of the struggles we've had is landlords who aren't sympathetic to home educators and evict them because they got a bunch of little people around or because the backyard they don't believe they should be using, etc. We've bought a couple of duplexes because we're also a housing developer to help support that, but finding a far better, a far larger and landlord to support that would be extraordinary. We can only do, I mean, we have 6 duplexes, 3 of which we'd rent to home educators, based on bedroom configuration, et cetera, et cetera. So that is an extraordinarily, really an extraordinary and reasonably simple, I don't know, it seems simple to me not doing it, right? Way to stabilize our home educator field. Because, and this may be a Western Mass thing. There's a whole lot of investment money coming into our regions, buying housing and changing the game. Every month there's a new investor buying a new property, and all of a sudden it's not the local vibe, it's a New York centric vibe, and they just want to make their lives easier as property managers, and that doesn't include having home educators in their buildings. And so we're seeing it more and more, and I don't know that it's going to get any better before it continues to get worse. And in regards to talking to people, I don't know how granular you want to get. If you want to talk to a room full of home educators, similar to Jessica, who has obviously amazing ideas, I think talking to the systems to figure out when their PD days are. We have a spring PD day coming, where all our home educators, there's about 146 of them, will be in one room. So
I would happily take you up on that.
If that's the audience you want, let us know, and
Yeah.
we can get you through MADCO. We can get you a whole bunch of other systems that have a whole bunch of home educators, so you can hear from the horse's mouth what they need. Then we're happy to support that.
That sounds great. I will absolutely follow up with you after that. I'd be very appreciative for that opportunity. So thank you. And then there are a couple other folks jumped in the chat as well with opportunities to connect. So Cheryl is offering an opportunity to include a survey in your newsletter, which I think would be excellent. So I would love to follow up with you on that. Thank you, Jessica, for dropping in the link to the diversity certification you mentioned. Heidi mentioned access to attorneys and human resource experts, as well as opportunities to access benefits such as health insurance as part of a larger purchasing group. Yeah, this is definitely something we've heard, unsurprisingly. And so the other kind of part of this work is, are there any similarities we can draw from how small businesses have organized themselves, right? In terms of increasing their purchasing or bargaining power. And that can help inform, I think, a lot of the needs that we've heard of. So that's part of the work stream as well. Great. I would love to come into the Y. That sounds great. So I'll write all this down so I don't lose it, unless like the Zoom chat is saved somewhere, but I always feel like it just goes away. And I'll be responsible for following up with everybody. So thank you. And that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Gabby, and to all of our presenters, and to all of you. Give you 12 minutes back in your day. And thank you all for everything you do, your support, and we will see you next quarter. Take care.
Thanks all.